So I never tell anybody, whether child, teen, adult, that you can't be angry, right? Sometimes they get this message from whether it's teachers or parents, like, you can't be angry. No, you can be angry. In fact, I'd like you to be angry from time to time. I want you to have that release valve. But what do we do with it after? So we've had our anger episode. Okay, now what? How can we understand it better? Hello and welcome. We're so glad you're tuning into the Taking Good Care show. I'm Dr. Andrew Wong, based in Toronto, Canada.
And I'm Dr. David St. Arno, based in Edmonton, Canada. We're two practicing psychologists with over a decade of experience each, working in a variety of settings and supporting diverse populations.
Thanks for joining us. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. While we're both practicing psychologists, our podcast is intended purely for educational and entertainment purposes. It's not a substitute for professional mental health care or treatment. If you're in need of support, we strongly encourage you to reach out to a licensed mental health professional in your area.
Good afternoon, Andrew.
Good afternoon, Dave. We're switching things up today, recording in the afternoon instead of the morning.
Yeah, I have to say, I think the morning's my preference. I like to
Same
start
here.
the day off. Yeah. So hopefully we're not fading too much. We both kind of worked the full day and yeah, this is the tail end of our day, almost the bookend. So right
Tail end of the
before,
week.
yeah, right before the long weekend. So
That's right. This is the end of my day. This is the end of my day. No more work after this, so hopefully I don't fade too fast.
well, you know what? If you don't want to fade, there's nothing better to talk about than anger, right?
Yep.
So we decided this is going to be our topic for this afternoon, and it's something that comes up a lot with the men's group that I support, and even individual referrals and working with kids. I know that you see this a lot too.
Yep.
Um,
Working with children, working with parents, and both sides of the coin. Anger shows up, whether it's with the children or the caregivers, and maybe one sort of riles up the other. And then what do you do? Right. So
yeah,
I'm sure some of the adults you work with, they are parents, they're caregivers as well.
absolutely. So. Yeah, if we're going to dive into anger, like I said, it can be energizing. I think it's actually quite empowering. And so,
Yes.
like some people could say, you can even get addicted to, being angry because it can drive you to give you energy. It's almost the opposite of feeling really depressed and low energy, right? So
Yes.
some of this, yeah, can be actually utilized for good, but it can also, burn down the whole village. So,
Well, even when I think for myself or perhaps some listeners listening to this right now, think of times when you're angry, right? I have parents who come and they say, my child gets so angry and I just need something where they will just come down. And they're pretty much looking for a fix, right? Like,
mhm,
get my child down when they are at an 11 out of 10 on that anger scale. And I need them instantaneously to be at a 3.
yeah.
It's not going to happen, right? And I tell them that straight up because when I think for myself, when I work with adults, how many times can we even bring ourselves down from an 11 down to a 3 within minutes? No way. So how can we expect kids to do that?
Well, even the listeners, yeah. Think about the last time you were angry and someone
Yeah.
told you to like shut it down or
Calm
stop.
down.
Yeah.
Calm down, relax.
Yeah. Yeah. Famous Dr. Phil line, like, how's that working for you? Right. Like it doesn't work, but it's instinctual. It's automatic for so many parents, so many, people in relationships, and anger can be quite scary and dangerous, especially if you grew up in a home where, anger was damaging and hurtful and abusive. Any sign of it, you can be super sensitive to it. And, as a real safety concern, absolutely.
Yeah.
And healthy anger can also be really good. So,
Yes. Yes. By the way, I don't think either of us are proponents of Dr. Phil.
oh no, did we just plug Dr. Phil on our show? Okay.
I had to put that out there just in case.
I know. I was just worried about copyright, so it's not my line.
Yeah, so I think we need to define anger to start. And a lot of the research has shown that anger is regarded as a secondary emotion or feeling. And I think in our episode going back a couple of months to the one with Dr. Kendall Bannock, just with respect to emotion focused therapy, we touched on anger a little bit. And we did talk about how anger is regarded as a secondary emotion. And what does that mean? So oftentimes we may have other primary emotions, but perhaps because the primary emotions cause significant discomfort, we skip right to the secondary emotions, right? And a big one, of course, is anger.
Yeah, actually, anyone who wants to, I may have mentioned this in the previous episode, but just look up like anger iceberg and there'll be tons of images online. And that is a super helpful kind of approach to understanding anger. That
Hmm.
if you can, as you are becoming angry, or maybe you've already flipped your lid, right? And then you go, what is going on here? Right. And so when we're defining anger, it's often, or it can be a normal, adaptive emotional response
Hmm.
to perceived threats or injustices. So, am I under attack? Do I feel threatened? Then anger can be a quick response to that, right?
Yep.
Or is something wrong? Is there an injustice happening? Then I'm going to feel angry, right? And so oftentimes when I see anger, I'm checking out which one of those two things is actually going on.
Yep.
And maybe I validate the anger and all of a sudden the tears start coming. And I
Hmm.
go, oh, so underneath the anger is a lot of hurt or a lot of sadness, right?
Yep.
That secondary emotion. So,
And it's so interesting because it happens both with children and adults. And we can get so angry that the tears do come. And I'll ask, what are those tears about? Right. And I would say there's a good chunk of adults who I work with who will also say, just like children, I don't know.
mhm.
I'm not sure.
I remember doing a group with kids at a school when I was doing my internship in Ontario in my master's. And what we did is we actually had the kids lay down on this big sheet of paper, outline their body. And so they had like a life-size kind of body silhouette. And in there, we started to draw or like color or mark like the places that they recognized where they felt anger, right? That physical sensation, like either burning in the stomach or, their hands were on fire or
Hmm.
their heart was beating quickly, right?
Yep.
Just starting to create that body awareness, like the physical side of anger. And then there's the behavior and emotional and cognitive side of it, like the thoughts that go through our head. But a lot of people say, like, I can go from 0 to 60 in like this. But
Yep.
really, I often think, or I often see, people don't go from 0 to 60. They go from 59 to 60. They're living their life on the 59, and it takes one stubbing of the toe, it takes
Yep.
one cutoff in traffic, and they're raging.
Road rage is a great example.
Mm-hmm.
Road rage is a good
Mm-hmm.
example. You have an objective, a goal, and I think when people are driving, it's like I need to get there as quickly as possible. Plus, I don't want to be late, right? And there's principles on the road. And so
Mm-hmm.
everyone should be following these principles. And all of these combinations of factors just enrage people when one of those things are broken, right? I'm going to be late, right? Or that person didn't follow the rules of the road. And it
Mm-hmm.
just, yeah, it just gets people going.
This comes up a lot with my military veteran population that I work with. The
Hmm.
drive to the office can be like the bulk of the session, right? Like, so this idea that there's rules of the road, like you said, that there's a certain way that these things should unfold, that people
Hmm.
should be a certain way. And if you've spent a lot of time in the military, right, that rules and order and structure is super important. It's actually like, your life depends on it. And then you get
Yes.
out into like civilian life and people are doing whatever they want. They're not following the lights and the signs, and they're on their phone. And that can be really upsetting. And again, that's that like injustice. Something is wrong in the world. And those thoughts, those feelings, they can kind of spiral and escalate to the point where they want to like teach someone a lesson or call them out or take
Yeah.
action into their own hands because that's not right.
And it's very similar with children. I work with kids who will get upset really quickly if a friend or a classmate, seems to do some sort of an injustice,
Yeah.
right? Doesn't follow a rule. Maybe it's a sibling who didn't do as they were told, or in their minds, they have some sort of expectation of how things are supposed to unfold. That's their rule in that
Mm,
moment. And
hmm
when things don't unfold a certain way, sort of just like driving, you expect everyone to follow the rules of the road, right? And then when that expectation isn't met, boom, right? Anger,
Yeah.
right? Being enraged. Now, I think for children, what I find, and Dave, you can speak with respect to adults, I find that children with maybe weaker verbal skills or weaker verbal expressive skills will sometimes have a much more difficult time because they just have a tougher time expressing using language. It
hmm
comes out as those actions,
hmm
as the yells and the screams and the throwing things.
And the hitting.
And the hitting, that's right. Right. So all those nonverbal ways of expressing anger or what we say sort of that unintelligible language, that yelling, gibberish, that's how it often comes out.
hmm
So I go back to using that feelings poster. I've talked about it in the past for a couple of episodes where I've got this poster in my office. I love using it because when I ask a child, okay, how did you feel in that moment? They'll always point to anger. And I
hmm
never end there though. I always say, well, what else? What more did you feel? And oftentimes the next ones can be either sadness, shame, annoyance,
hmm
right? They were annoyed,
Yeah.
right? But in the moment, they couldn't express that. They couldn't tell people that they were sad that something didn't meet expectation.
Yeah, I think, really, first question, is it a primary emotion or a secondary emotion?
Yes.
If it's a secondary, what else is going on? Right. And let's look at that. But that's going to be less visceral, less automatic,
Hmm.
especially, so you can tease that apart. Where the more like the kids with impulsivity, the adults with
Hmm.
impulsivity,
Yeah.
right? That quick switch. So I know for my son, it was written in his like psychoed assessment that, and it was super helpful. I like this is one of my main takeaways that I took away from the full report was that when when someone accidentally hits him, he often will interpret it as malicious, right?
Yes.
So if he's putting on his coat at the end of the day and the school hallway is really busy and someone bumps into him, he is more likely to push that kid or hit that kid, right? Because he thinks
Hmm.
someone hit him.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that almost like lizard brain kind of reaction that is just so wired into our nervous system,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So a lot of times people are asking me, especially like adult men who have been in trouble with the law or are struggling in relationships, and they're like, how do I stop doing that? It's happening before I can even recognize it.
So sometimes it's like not quite understanding the context before reacting.
hmm
Right. So even when I write my reports for some students, people don't often think of ADHD and anger going together or that sort of emotional dysregulation going together, right?
Yeah.
Because all we think about a lot of the time ADHD behaviors, right? The impulsivity. Let's run out of here, right? Let's go and hit someone before I actually think of anything else. Right. But it is a big part of the emotion dysregulation. It's like if we think about within the classroom, you have to understand the context of a number of different things around you. Right. So if someone does bump into you or hit you, let's say by accident, yeah, that lizard brain, like you said, Dave, first reaction is, what the heck? Why'd you hit me?
Yeah.
right? I'm going to hit you back now. I didn't like that,
Yeah.
right? But did that individual or child or student think about the context,
Hmm.
right? Is it really crowded here? And so everyone's trying to put their jacket on. And so, yeah, we're bound to hit somebody or bump somebody by accident. But we go straight to the anger sometimes.
Absolutely. I think, making that connection with the emotional dysregulation and ADHD, can be so helpful because it's like, oh yeah, right. This child or this adult might be yelling. Like maybe a lot of
Hmm.
adults have learned like not to hit when they're angry, right? They've
Hmm.
kind of stopped from doing that, but they'll still
Yep.
yell. They might be like even just posturing, they're physically aggressive, right?
Yep.
And so understanding that piece is super helpful. And like you said, the if we can respond rather than react, right?
Yep.
That's like a huge piece, right? And a lot of
Yep.
people with anger, it's like, oh yeah, I just react, right? So
Yep.
how do we build in kind of a structure or strategies that help you better respond rather than
Yep.
just lizard brain reaction?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's really important too to remember developmentally, especially for young men, that part of your brain that governs emotion regulation doesn't fully develop until our early to mid 20s. So when you think about that and put that into perspective, how many times do we meet with high school students? And by all means, they're not bad students. They're not quote unquote bad kids. It's just poor decision making, right?
Hmm.
Because of perhaps emotion, right? So they've been wronged, and so now I'm going to get you back,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Without thinking of the consequences. They're working with their emotion, their anger,
Hmm.
right? But think about that also for a moment. They're working with their anger, but if someone wronged them, what must what other feeling might they be feeling or experiencing?
Hmm.
Right? So is it embarrassment that someone did something to them, or perhaps shame?
For sure. And this, you were wronged, right? You
Yep.
were hurt. Just identifying that for someone, it's like, yeah, I was screwed over, or I was,
Yeah.
taken advantage of, or I was manipulated. All of those things can, create this rage of like
Yep.
automatic or even more kind of like vengeful, like I'm going to
Yep.
get back at someone. This is going to, what goes around comes around,
Yep.
right? And
Yep.
so, and you were talking like for neurotypical, like people
Yes.
without like ADHD, right? You're saying
Yes.
24, 25, but for people with ADHD, it can be even later than that, right? And
Yep.
so a kid who's in grade 10 might be their emotional regulation skills or their prefrontal cortex that is what helps us respond rather than
Hmm.
react might be a bit more delayed than the other kids in the same grade, right?
Right.
And one more
Yeah.
thing about this, I was just chatting with someone the other day and like alcohol, right?
Mm.
So if you already struggle with this kind of like reactive part or like emotional dysregulation or impulsive, add alcohol, it's going to impair that part of the brain that puts the brakes on that helps you respond or other substances too. But just knowing that if you're going into a stressful situation
Yep.
where you have been wronged
Yep.
or someone is going to be there that you don't get along with, it might be a good idea not to drink any alcohol so that
Yeah.
you can fully be able to best regulate your emotions and
Yep.
not, yeah.
Yeah. So many different factors, can contribute to the way we self-regulate, how we experience anger, how we even interpret anger. A lot of, I wouldn't say a lot. I would say that there's a good chunk of teenagers who I work with, whether you're a boy or a girl, a young man or young woman, where they are very much driven by anger,
Hmm.
right? Whether it's anger towards peers, anger towards family members, and they sort of go to sleep angry, wake up angry, and it just starts to really contribute to a toxic environment at school or at home, right? They
Hmm.
just sort of go day in, day out with this sort of simmering anger, as I like to put it. They're just constantly simmering. And then, like, one little thing, whether it's at home or a teacher says something to them in class,
Hmm.
and boom, like it just becomes rage. They storm out of the classroom. Principal gets on them now, parents get on them, and it just spirals.
For sure. And I think people can react quite harshly to anger,
Yeah.
right? And even
Yeah.
parents, like it can be really uncomfortable to see your child. Like we'd almost prefer the tears or prefer the like internalizing depressive kind of symptoms when someone is hurt rather than the reactive externalizing anger that actually can hurt other people and themselves, right?
Yeah. It just causes discomfort in all parties involved.
Hmm.
Right. And we want to go into that fix it mode, tell me what's wrong. And me as a parent, I will come and fix it because I might be actually more uncomfortable with your anger than you
Hmm.
are.
Yeah. I'm putting the flames out before they're even, getting very big. And I'm
Yeah.
going to stomp it out to make sure that that doesn't, show up. And I think therapists or psychologists and mental health people, like, if you're not comfortable with anger, actually, reminds me of the men's group, right? Anger is something that is quite often a big part of, where men are at when they're struggling, right?
Yep.
So we've even had like interns and stuff help out with the group. And part of their own work is just getting comfortable being around people that are angry, right?
Yep.
Because it's
S-
distressing. Yeah.
So let me ask you, Dave, what do we do with anger? I know you work with adults much more, but when you're working with, let's say, in a group setting or even individuals,
Hmm.
what do we do with anger?
Well, in the therapy room, right? It's not so much like what we call like in vivo in the wild, right? So it is going to be different. So when I'm checking out what are people reacting or responding to what's going on around them, and sometimes they're not naming it, and I'm going, it looks like you're kind of angry, right? Like I'm going to check it out. And for some people, I'm actually encouraging them to be angry, right?
Yep.
Go ahead, let that anger be here. Feel it. Notice where you feel it in your body. Notice what thoughts go along with that. Like really kind of let yourself feel it. And then we start to explore it. And is it because you were hurt? Is it because, and sometimes like it's actually a really healthy and adaptive response to be angry when we've been hurt. And
Yep.
shutting that down or dismissing it or minimizing it or ignoring it is actually unhealthy. And
Hmm.
it kind of keeps us stuck in maybe unhealthy relationships or unhealthy workplaces, right?
I think the clients who benefit the most from that are the ones sometimes who I hear they just try to keep everything rosy and rainbows.
Hmm.
Even when they tell me of a situation and I'll be angry for them.
Yeah.
But somehow they come up with a reason or explanations that really I don't know if twist is the right word, but sort of this reimagination of the situation. And they're like, oh, but it's all good. It's like, really? It's all good? Like, I'm sitting here feeling like you've been wronged.
Yeah. Yeah. Then you could be like, help me understand this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. This
Yeah.
is your response. I'm curious about that, right? And as you were talking about it, I had a personal example that just popped into my head. I think I grew up in a lot of ways where, anger was not, even though I'm a man, even though like maybe playing hockey, maybe some of
Mm,
these places, it was more kind of like acceptable and even like rewarded. But I think in general, the message I got was that it was not good. So even now, when I'm starting to feel angry, I won't even notice it. And
hmm.
then if my wife says like, "Why are you mad?" or "Why are you angry?" and my first response is, embarrassingly, my first response is like, "I'm not mad." And I'm screaming like, "What is going on here?" Right?
Yes.
So ignoring and minimizing or like repressing the anger can actually make things a lot worse, right?
As you're talking about this, Dave, it reminds me of even our masculinity episode. It's almost like in what context is it okay to show anger, and in what contexts do we react to anger? In sports, going back to some sports, the one-upmanship, the fighting, the chirping, showing people up. there's a lot of anger sometimes in sports, and a lot of athletes are driven by this anger and that chip on their shoulder, so to speak,
Hmm.
right? To show that you're better than what somebody is saying,
Oh yeah.
right?
Like anyone who's familiar with the hockey, it's like, they get knocked down and they're looking for the number, right? They're going to pick
Yeah.
the number of the person who hurt them so that they can get back at them later, right? That even that phrase like hurt people, I think in some ways it kind of feels good when someone that hurt us is hurting,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So we can get caught kind of doing that, but then there's that whole like an eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind. Like that's
Hmm.
where does it stop?
Yeah.
And understanding that it might feel good for a minute, and then after that, it really doesn't feel good. And then it leads to other people maybe returning the favor. And
As you're talking about that, it's like I'm thinking about how it's so much like the world we live in currently. We won't go down that path today, but
well,
um
maybe a bit because
go for
it's
it.
it's powerful. Again, it's empowering rather than feeling weak, rather than feeling like, I can't do anything about this. I've just been hurt and I just need to take it. It's like,
Yeah.
no, I can do something about this and I'm not going to let this, go unpunished or yeah. So again, people can all of a sudden feel like, hey, I'm going to do something. And that is like, that feels good.
Right.
Yeah. So
Right.
how do we harness that, right? First off, yes, you were wronged. There is injustice.
Hmm.
Second of all, you want to do something about this. Now the choices are there, right? It's not that I'm going to punch him in the nose. The next time he opens his mouth, I'm going to fill it with my fist. It's how do I not get pushed around or not get bullied, but also not bully back, right?
Hmm. What are our choices in terms of our actions? Is hitting someone back the only choice I have, versus perhaps going to tell a teacher? But again, it takes that skill and, for our brain to slow down a little bit and think, okay, what decisions do I have right now? And I would say, yes, a lot of kids I work with, anger's there, right? They come because parents are like their their behavior is like out of hand. They get angry right away, 0 to 60 really fast, don't know what to do. But I would say the majority of kids I work with, they're not prone to hitting back right away. You've got a handful of them, but many of them when they get angry, it's like the screaming, right? The screaming, the throwing things, maybe, the curse words come out, many of them at a time. And so, it's the rage that comes out. They don't necessarily hit other kids, which is good to see for most of the population. And I think for me, a big part of it, I go back to what I was talking about at the beginning. We can't expect kids to all of a sudden just turn it off. What I try to instill in terms of empowering caregivers and parents, and even some of the children, is how can we be proactive? How can we try to see things coming before it happens?
Hmm.
Right. And if we know that there are certain things that really get us upset, injustices, for example, how do I walk into a situation being more preventative, knowing that, okay, if I have these expectations, I also know that I may need to be a little bit flexible with those expectations. And is that okay?
For sure. Yeah.
And then when they do, let's say they do go 0 to 60 and we're past the prevention point, the proactive point. I often will tell them, we do have to get that anger out of the system, right? We can't just say shut it off or relax, calm down. We laughed when we said that earlier because we know, I think, as clinicians, that will just make things worse,
Hmm.
right? I mean, even when I think for myself, if I'm angry and someone tells me, you know, just relax, that's not going to fly well. Right?
No,
Like, what
no.
do you
And
mean tell her to relax? I'm pissed off right now.
well, it's invalidating, right? It's
Yep,
actually
exactly.
telling you to stop or don't feel what you're feeling. And that can actually feel like an injustice. It's like,
Hmm.
why can't I be upset? Right?
Yep.
Because you're uncomfortable with it. And then it makes you more angry. So
Yes.
yeah, again, I think like you were saying about being proactive, that's the first piece. Like, so when I'm working with, say, a man in my office that is like, what do I do? Like, how do I stop doing this? I say start with the proactive part. Like, learn your soft spots, learn your emotional bruises that you're carrying around with you, that when someone pushes on it, you become quite reactive, right? And even in therapy, we might start to identify some of those that someone isn't totally aware of. So,
And then oftentimes the second piece that I go after that when I'm talking to parents, caregivers, even teachers, it's naming the behavior. Right? I know some people will say name the feeling might be next. I go with the behaviors first because I find that there's more power in letting kids know that, look, this is what I'm seeing right now. These are my observations,
hmm
right?
hmm
I find that we have more traction when we say, I hear you right now. You're very, very loud.
hmm
Or I
hmm
see that your hands are in fists right now, or I see that you are turning red. I don't necessarily go to the interpretation right away, right? Because if I would rather say I can see that, you are very tense and you are stomping your feet. If I go and say, I can see you're super angry right now, or you're really anxious, right? It goes to that judging, that interpreting, right?
hmm
And a child or a teenager will be this, well, might just come back and say, what are you talking about? I'm not anxious. I'm not even angry,
hmm
right? But at least with behaviors, there's evidence. If they're stomping, they're stomping.
You know what? I'm learning something right now because I think I get caught in that trap sometimes where I'm trying to validate the feeling. And just like you said, it comes across as like judgment. So
Hmm.
it's almost like I'm saying you're angry, but I'm really saying like stop being angry. Like don't feel that feeling. Even though I'm trying to validate it, I think probably the rest of me is
Yeah.
like communicating that it's not okay and you better stop doing that as soon as you can. But the way you described just naming the behaviors, what you're observing, what you're noticing, yeah, I think I'm gonna take that with me, even though we're not at the end of today with our takeaway. That's something that I'm gonna because there's that phrase like name it to tame it. And for a lot of emotions, that does work, right? Because it's actually part of emotional regulation.
Yep.
We're putting words to the feelings we're having. But if someone already knows they're angry and you tell them you look angry, like that might not be
It's a bit
validating.
patronizing,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
no kidding, Sherlock. I
Yeah.
am angry. Like, thanks for pointing out the obvious. Right?
Uh,
So yeah, I will usually go with the behavior first. Like for example, if my children like they play the piano and it's a music is tough and so sometimes they get frustrated. I'll just at a first point of I guess conversation, I will say, I hear you're banging the keys, right? Or I hear that you're playing this really fast, like almost like you're just trying to get it over with, like what's going on.
hmm
They can't argue it. Like they are banging the keys,
hmm
right? And then from that, it's sort of planting the seed like, okay, I hear you, I see you,
hmm
right? And so I'm planting the seed here. And now maybe the next part of the conversation is, okay, what's going on? I won't necessarily say, how are you feeling? Right. But I'll start off with what's going on, what's up,
hmm
right?
Oh man, have you read like Ross Green?
Yep.
Yeah, Raising Human Beings. Like that's one of his thing is just like you observe and you reflect it back and you say, "Hey, I see you slamming the cupboards. What's up?" Right?
Yep.
And really non-judgmentally just trying to kind of get an idea of gathering information.
Yep.
And then the person can also gain some self-awareness that like, "Oh, I didn't even notice that." So now,
Yeah.
actually my example earlier, when my wife says like, "Are you stressed? Are you okay?" that gets me to pause and reflect like, oh, am I angry or stressed about something right now? And rather than me being like, I'm not, whatever, it's a point of like a cue and a gentle way to have me reflect on myself in that moment, which is kind of nice.
We're planting the seed, right? We're planting the seed that someone is here for you. We hear you, we see you, we're going to support you. Let us know what's going on. if you can. Now, like I said earlier, some kids are much more verbally expressive than others. I would say for those who are not as verbally expressive, and let's say they are getting enraged, I would say a lot of parents also start to feel the rage too. They get angry along with their children. And, at that point, I will often say, okay, maybe everybody just needs their own space right now.
Hmm.
Right. So at that point in time, it's like, we can't keep fighting fire with fire.
Yeah.
Right. And so, I know there's a lot of gentle parenting stuff out there going on that says, give your child a hug or, be there to hold their hand. And again, you have to know who your children are. Maybe that is something that will work. And I have made recommendations or suggestions that perhaps your child does need a hug in that moment. But I would say sometimes not at all. Sometimes everybody needs their space just to go from that 11 down to maybe a 9 or an 8
Yeah.
so that we can actually come back together
Yeah.
within the next 10 minutes, 20 minutes. Then once we get down to the 8 or the 7, now we can start to generate a conversation. But you're not going to get any fruitful conversation
Yeah.
when you are at a 10 out of 10 and everybody's just angry.
Yeah, well, like Daniel Siegel talks about, the lid gets flipped, right? So if you hold your hand with your thumb on the inside, it's that like your prefrontal cortex, the front of your brain that helps us regulate is just offline, right? And it's
Yep.
flipped. And in that state, you just need to know what your kid needs and whether it is
Yep.
space or whether it is a hug or whether it is, like there's a whole bunch of different things. But
Yep.
I like Dr. Becky Kennedy, that Good Inside
Yep.
book that I just finished. I wish she would have put this chapter earlier on, but at the end of the book, it's like, oh, and by the way, all these strategies that help most kids don't work for some kids that are like these deeply feeling kids, is what she calls them, but like the really intense kids. And I'm like, those are my kids, right? Like the hug is going to get me a punch in the face. Like that is not going to be the strategy to use. So,
Yeah.
yeah, when
That's
the
why
lid is
I
flipped, yeah.
I never call it really gentle parenting. I like to think of things as assertive parenting. Like assertiveness to me means being caring, being respectful,
Hmm.
and if you need something, you can kindly request it, but in a way that shows that perhaps you have some authority,
Yeah.
that you can get your point across succinctly and in a meaningful way.
I call it firm
Yeah.
parenting, right? And you can be sturdy and firm and contain some of it, right? While still also letting some of it happen, right? So I might actually be keeping my son in his room because it is dangerous to be outside of that space. I might be holding a firm boundary, but also letting him know that like he's okay, right?
Yep.
He's allowed to be angry. Like I'm not shutting that down and I'm not going to let him like break something or hit me or right. So it's gentle, I don't think fits that description of in that situation, right? It's actually being quite firm. And then he can trust that I'm strong enough, even in therapy, right? That our clients can trust that we can handle their feelings so that they can just have them. That can be really reassuring.
And I just want to finish my thoughts about having that space because I will get parents who will ask, so you just let them be like you just let them go to their room and that's it, or you go your separate ways. No, I think the part that often gets missed is like we're still there for them. And we tell our kids when you're ready, we'll have this conversation or we'll come back together and talk about what just happened. And so it's not just leaving your kids there for the rest of the night, or for the next 6 hours. It's checking in on them in like 10, 15 minutes to say, hey, was everything all right? Are you ready to come back together? Right. So you don't have to say the words, I'm here for you, I'm here to continue supporting you. But through our actions, by approaching and showing that, hey, just because we had this sort of rupture here, I'm going to be this model to show you that we can reconnect,
Hmm.
right? We can reconnect. Even though you were really angry, I was really angry, we can
Hmm.
still create a bridge again, right? And to me, like that's really, really important that we show our kids that. And honestly, like between adults, you can do the same thing.
Yeah. Well, and anger is one of the things that can really disconnect relationships, right? And it can be years before adults speak to each other again, right? And even kids, it leaves them, I think, in this pit of shame, right? Where they feel terrible about themselves and they might even feel terrible about you. And you might even feel the same way, like, oh, I wish, I wish I had some time away, or I wish like it's so hard. So having compassion, and we've talked about this before. Actually, this is something from that Becky Kennedy book too. Again, like she talks about just like reminding yourself that you're good inside and you're struggling, like as a parent, and sharing that with the kid. You don't have to say the words, but just like holding space that they're good inside and they're also struggling at the same time. I've actually been practicing saying those words because it helps remind me when when my son is like breaking something that might cost a lot of money and I'm like, I'm starting to flip my lid. Right. And you know what? It was super funny. The other day, my one son, we were playing foosball and he was losing and was getting really upset with himself. And he's like, I'm good inside. And I was like, what? What? That actually entered his consciousness? That actually like
Nice.
in the middle of a rage, he somehow picked up what the words that I was using, or maybe my wife or something, because we're both trying to do this, but really neat, right? And we
Yeah.
hope that when kids are struggling, that they also can have some compassion for themselves and still stay connected to their goodness, even though they might be doing something that's quote unquote bad.
Yeah. Well, it connects back to that idea of shame and embarrassment or even guilt, right? What do you do with those emotions? That's why I think sometimes, yes, we see them as primary emotions and we skip it because most people don't know what to do with shame and embarrassment and guilt other than perhaps beat up on themselves.
Hmm.
Right? I did something wrong, so now I'm feeling shameful, I'm feeling guilty. Well, that is my weakness, that is my deficit, and I hate it. And so what am I going to do now? I'm going to beat myself up for it.
Yeah. Or the opposite. Like, I hate you. You
Hmm.
made me fill in the blank, right? So often I think that's one of the hard things with anger is we can like blame other people for making us feel that way. And then it
Yes.
becomes this like, well, if you wouldn't have done that, then I wouldn't have.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And sometimes that can sound so irrational too, as a third party listening to it.
Hmm.
And again, I think this is like the power of even couples counseling or family therapy, having somebody who's a third party to observe and listen to all of this can really help a family or a couple gain perspective on what's really going on in those relationships.
Yeah. Or group therapy, right? Hearing someone else run through what's going through their head, what they're feeling, and you get to kind of sit back and notice what you're feeling and what you're thinking and how much you relate to them or not, right? It's
Yep.
a way of even listening to this podcast, right?
Yep.
Like it's a way of reflecting and checking out what do you do for yourself? How much of this do you relate to without being in it?
Yep. The really cool experience right now, Dave, for me is like as we're talking about anger, it's like this coalescing factor of some of the other episodes that we've talked about and how much of it may go back to this emotion, whether it's couples therapy, whether it's the episode with Sharon about, parents or caregivers who are separating and how
Hmm.
much anger that might hold, self-compassion,
Yeah.
masculinity, emotion-focused therapy, like so much of it dives into this one emotion.
Well, and I think this emotion can, like I said, burn down the village. Like people, like the phrase of like it happened in a fit of rage, right? Like there can be really destructive things that happen. So I think anger gets a lot of attention for that reason,
Yeah,
right? And of course, it is a liability, it's a risk, but it's again, I think really natural and normal. And if it's well supported, then you can respond differently to those same feelings. So I always think like validate the feelings, not the behavior, right? And even when you were talking about the behavior, you're not validating it, you're just observing and reflecting back what you're seeing, right?
It has so much to do with, as you're saying, like anger can burn down the village. How many clients have you worked with, directly or indirectly, where they may be estranged
Hmm.
from another family member, or they haven't spoken to a friend in years because of one thing that may have happened?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that speaks to why a lot of people will be really careful or almost conflict avoidant or anger avoidant, right? Because it can do that. It can obviously like people could put up boundaries and say, you hurt me and I'm never speaking to you again because you can't take back those words or you can't take back the actions, right?
Hmm.
So, rightfully so, I think there needs to be a lot of attention. But again, knowing that the origins of it, the roots of it, are just normal, natural, human, even, mammalian kind of, that's how we're hardwired, right?
Yep.
Again, injustice or threat is going to provoke this.
Yep. Yep.
Hopefully, we can take a breath and not react. But you were talking, I thought you were going to take it in this direction because before we end, I definitely want to talk a little bit about this. So, I attended this workshop on, I think it was chronic pain and really interesting research. What they found was the individuals who had been through like motor vehicle accident and had, a
Hmm.
ton of chronic pain, those that did not get better correlated with those that had the most anger, right?
Yes. Yes.
So
I'm
almost like
glad
this
you
like
brought that up.
okay,
Yeah.
almost like the anger, the hidden cost of this anger.
Yeah.
Oh, that's another metaphor that I like is like anger's the coal that burns you, right? That you're holding in your hand. And you might be angry at someone that did something to you, and they're just
Yep.
living their life, having a great time. And you're the only one suffering from it. So the cost of it, it can build like resentment, depression, health issues, even
Yeah.
like ulcer kind of like internal, yeah, issues because
Yeah.
of this anger of the tension and all of the things that come with that physically.
Yeah. And you can sort of equate that kind of anger with just chronic stress as well,
Hmm.
right? You're just
Yep.
chronically thinking about negative things.
Yeah.
And is it Gabor Mate? I know you usually do all the books and you remember those books and authors so well, but he does talk about the hidden cost of stress. And you
Yeah.
can equate that with anger. Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up, Dave, because I worked with so many individuals in motor vehicle accidents when I started first in my career, and definitely those who harbored anger or ill will, this idea of, why me? Why did this happen to me?
Hmm.
Right. Not being able to let go of that anger towards somebody else,
Hmm.
perhaps even towards themselves of somehow getting into an accident, whether
Yeah.
it's workplace accident or motor vehicle accident. They definitely had a way tougher time recovering
Hmm.
from the motor vehicle accident, all the consequences or sequelae of the motor vehicle accident.
For sure. And if you, again, this injustice, right? It's not right. Like, I didn't do anything wrong. I was following all the rules and someone hit me, right? Why? Like, and of course, that is like natural and normal. But getting stuck there can leave our whole nervous system stuck in that place where we do have tension through our body that can create that like chronic pain that is and not saying like, this is for everyone, but there's definitely a correlation, a connection. So looking at how much anger you kind of feel and hold in a regular basis, and then what kind of health issues might be kind of connected to that. Actually, another book I'll throw out there. What is Sarno, I think, similar to my last name. And he's written about a lot about chronic pain and the connection between rage or repressed anger, repressed rage, and being able to write about it and express it helps reduce the physical symptoms that people are experiencing, the mind-body connection.
Well, this is why when I work with a lot of teenagers, even children, I talk about, what happens when that jar, that bucket gets filled up with anger, and we sort of put a lid on it all the time. That lid's going to explode at some point.
Hmm.
So I never tell. anybody, whether child, teen, adult, that you can't be angry, right? Sometimes they get this message from whether it's teachers or parents, like, you can't be angry. No, you can be angry. In fact, I'd like you to be angry from
Hmm.
time to time. I want you to have that release valve. But what do we do with it after? Right? So we've had our anger episode. Okay, now what? How can we understand it better?
Well, and adding to that, it's all coming back to me now with that workshop. Basically, the strategy was for a lot of people, it's like, is this a solvable problem? Right?
Hmm.
So you're angry about this. Can we do something about it? Right? And if there is, taking effective action feels great and generally reduces the anger. But some of these things, like if the person that hit you, or like there is nothing you can do about that, right? Like your life was completely altered because of something else that someone else did. Is that a solvable problem? No, right? So then it's grief, right? It's
Hmm.
loss, it's a whole package of stuff. But so actually sometimes anger can prevent us or help us avoid feeling grief, the
Yeah.
loss.
And again, when you talk about grief, loss, shame, embarrassment, guilt, tough, tough emotions to have to sit with in
Mhm.
that discomfort. Whereas I think for some individuals, they think that with anger, I'm actually doing something with it.
It feels self-righteous. Like it feels,
Yes.
yeah.
But then I also ask the question, how adaptive is it? Right? Are you scaring everyone around you? Right? And I don't know if this is the exact saying, but it's like, when you scare everyone around you, like, did you want that side to be seen by everybody? Right? And now that breeds even more embarrassment.
But if you feel threatened and you want to keep yourself safe, anger might push a whole bunch of people away. And that actually is quite, functional and adaptive, right? But if it's, say, the person that you want to get closer to,
Yeah.
or people you want, more in your life, then it's not going to be adaptive, right? And
Yeah.
when you were bringing up all those big feelings and like not feeling them, or that brings up the mindfulness episode, right? A lot of mindfulness is being able to sit with these uncomfortable feelings, right? And be more
Hmm.
comfortable or allow yourself, then you don't have to resort to other things to avoid feeling them, right?
Yeah. It's easier said than done. It's definitely easier said than done. Even for myself, when I get angry, and this is funny because I don't know if this ever happens with you, Dave. I've had clients, especially parents, who say, "Oh, you know what? Dr. Andrew's household must be so calm." It doesn't seem like he ever gets angry, never gets. And it's like, trust me, there are times when, we all feel anger. I wouldn't be human if I didn't feel anger. But yeah, even for myself, it's reminding myself, okay, what is this all about right now? Is
Yeah.
it that I'm embarrassed because of something
Mm-hmm.
I did and I'm taking it out on myself?
Mm-hmm.
Am I just withdrawing from the rest of my family for, again, is it protection? Is it that I just need time to
Mm-hmm.
figure this all out? And for me, it's often time. I just need time for the anger or whatever feeling it is to just subside a little bit. And then, I always tell my wife, like, when I'm ready, I'll tell you what this is all about. And sometimes does it take me longer to get into that readiness stage? Absolutely.
Well, and when it feels critical or urgent, right, that can be a recipe for the rage or the intense anger. And so being able to remind yourself that I can take time with this, like you just said, I need a minute, right? I
Hmm.
don't have to deal with this right now. It's not something. So, I was actually, as you were talking, thinking about something that happened for me recently. And absolutely, people think, oh, well, your house must be so peaceful, or like everyone's talking about their feelings and they're great. And it's like, yeah, there are a lot of times where I like look over my shoulder and be like, did someone see me do that? Right? Like, because actually the Mike Tyson quote that like everyone has a plan till they get punched in the face, like that's kind of for me, like I'm like using all the skills and I'm like there with my son who are my either of my sons who are like having a big episode. And I'm like, yeah, I'm doing it. It feels good. I'm supporting them in a way that I think they need to be supported. And then my glasses get knocked off my face, right?
Mm,
Or
hmm.
they, hit me in a sore spot. And then it's like, probably not my best moment, right? Like it's just like, oh my God, of course. So the last time I went into this, I was asking my wife if she wanted me to fill in for a bit when she was doing this, sitting with one of our sons. But before I did that, I went in the bathroom, I took my glasses off, I put my contacts on. I like gave myself a pep talk about like, hey, I know what's going to happen. And so when he went for those sore spots or when he like I was ready for it and I was like, okay, I was able to block it and I was able to better like handle it, right? So again, being prepared and knowing your sore spots will also help kind of prevent the natural normal anger, outbursts, rage behaviors that can
I
happen to
love that
all
though
of us.
because you prepared. You're prepared. It's like you knew what was coming, and talk about being preventative and proactive, right? Like let's not add fuel to the flames, right? Let me take a minute, prepare myself, put on my cup,
Yeah.
and I'll feel more confident and
Yeah.
prepared going into this, right? Rather than being caught off guard.
And we haven't even used the word today, but triggered, right?
Yeah.
So
I thought, yeah, you know what? That word came to my brain at one point, and I sort of consciously didn't use it.
okay. Well, we got an episode on trauma coming up, and triggered tends to be a pretty like familiar term for that. So I'm sure we'll touch on it there.
I think this is again a discussion that we can have. Maybe even I'm gonna plug this for Kendall. Maybe have Kendall come back and talk more about anger. Because again, I think the EFD episode touched on anger, but I think there's so much more to anger than meets the eye. Like I mentioned, it's just sort of networks all these other episodes, all these other psychology concepts that we brought up in the past and topics that we brought up in the past. And so much of it goes back to this emotion. All right, Dave, takeaway?
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna say. My takeaway, I think I'm just reflecting a bit, and I think anger is often recognized as like a damaging, unhealthy emotion that people try to avoid. But I think, hopefully you can gather that from most of our discussion is that like it can actually be an opportunity to get closer, right? To learn about people's sore spots and like, oh, I didn't know that you were so sensitive to being called, weak or dumb, or not that you would, use those words, but like that in like making a comment that maybe suggests that someone is not something, but and then you get to learn that like, oh, so you were bullied as a kid and those were the words that people used, or like, oh, you grew up in a home and that was like something that you worked really hard to hide or not show to other people. I think the underside to the anger can be a real like way of getting close to the people that we care about. And if we're not automatically trying to shut out or stop the anger, yeah, there's opportunity for closeness and growth and self-awareness that can come from it too.
And I think my takeaway, or perhaps even my final message is because I work with so many caregivers and parents and teachers, model that behavior for the children as you talk about gaining self-awareness, right? Model the fact that even though we can have a rupture, we can also build a bridge,
Mhm.
right? And it just shows that just because we have one rupture doesn't mean it's the end of a relationship. It doesn't
Mhm.
mean that this is just going to be a spiral for the next 10 years, right? We can come back together, be more aware, even after when we need 15 minutes, half an hour apart from each other. That's okay. It's okay to be angry. It's a message, it's a sign, and let's use it for growth.
Yeah, that modeling, like for parents, just saying it out loud, right? Talking about how you're feeling, what's going on in your body, what you need, so your kids can kind of hear you kind of process and work through it and know that it's something that we all work on and it's not easy, right?
Hmm.
So,
Absolutely. All right. I think there's going to be more to come with anger. And, it's Friday afternoon. I'm done. I don't know if you're done, given the time difference.
Hopefully I'm off to the lake in about half an hour. So yeah.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Take care, everyone. Oh, and before we sign off, again, if you enjoyed this episode, if you are enjoying the podcast, rate it, subscribe, follow, give us a thumbs up, and leave us comments. We always appreciate them. And until the next episode, take good care.
Take care, Andrew.